be fine now, hopefully. Um, Qntkka says, perhaps your quote-unquote position does not reflect the position of most current mainstream feminists. Okay. I reply to that, who cares? Okay. He says, of course you care. Oh, you're talking to me, you must care. Yeah, I care about having the conversation. I don't care if my position reflects the position of most current mainstream feminists. I also do not accept that you are able to know that, and you just say it, and I accept that. Everything you say, no. Mainstream feminists, you already made clear you don't think now that spends millions of dollars working for feminist causes counts, but all the Twitter people who, how much money do they really put into it or make or any of that? Oh, well enough. Well, it still wouldn't matter if it was the bulk and all of the mainstream. It would not be my opinion. Every bell curve has people like that. How do you know your position reflects the mainstream of people that think women have already got too many rights? Okay. You continue though. I have always maintained that quote unquote their goals are not your own, so you cannot accuse me of quote grouping you in with SJWs. To see how that works, attribution bias, sociology 101. Well, one, you're not the only person on your side. So while I don't say that you're like all the anti-SJWs, one, I've been called an SJW plenty of times. Again, somewhat immaterial, right? I have reasons I would not run from it, even if I hadn't been called from it, that I might attribute it to myself. Because as I've said and you refuse to answer, you don't have a positive word for working for social justice. You only have the negative word. Okay, when Rush made up the word feminazi and said, oh, no, not all feminists. No, he meant all feminists. That's how that generally works out. To discriminate between you doing that or you doing this other thing and just saying, identifying a certain group of people, you'd have to give a shit about these issues because you have, in fact, swept all my ideas and I'm wrong and I've been proven wrong and I should admit I'm wrong. Separate from the label. Attributing the same things, though, that you say when you're talking about the label. So what's the difference again? To that I said, who cares? Ideas are themselves. There are a lot of people in any school of thought that disagree. Groups break down into individual ideas, the ideas of individuals. Individuals, this is the thing. You're always group thinking. You're always like, well, what do most people, what do the popular kids, what's the mainstream say? But do you really demonstrate that the so-called popular kids are like a majority of kids? What's the mainstream that makes them the popular kids? What do they think, and how does that all break down? No, you're talking about, well, and you have to do this and this to get the girls. No, there's other girls. There's a whole spectrum of people. I can say the fact that I'm called an SJW in the comment sections of the anti-SJW says I've been grouped in. As you have no words for the good side, I don't have reason to think you really make that distinction. You have not validated my goals, but only criticized people that allege to have my goals. Either you can suggest compromises we might agree on, or you can continue to battle without compromise. Either way is fine. I've suggested compromises such as the idea that gender studies should replace women's studies. But no, you don't want to talk about that. Not the topic as far as you see. Fine. We can fight this out with MTV and Disney or in the courts, etc., meaning in the popular culture or in the courts. But your side's declaration of victory and what most people think isn't working out as a historical trend. Obviously, it's getting more liberal in these regards, and that's why the panic on your part and your whole side's part. From my point of view, I can wait you out as far as society goes. The conversation is to see if you have any ideas. Maybe admit that there is a relationship between fantasizing about something and it happening sometimes. And I'll admit that dogmatic authoritarian people are always assholes, even if they call themselves a lover of peace and freedom. Right? So I don't like dogmatic people that say they happen to also self-describe themselves as feminists. And I don't like authoritarians that do that. I don't like authoritarians and dogmatists no matter what kind of sheep's clothing they're wearing, right? And they are in every group. It's a human mental metabolism that some people take their views that way, and when they join NASCAR they'll become authoritarian about the right way to do everything. That's some kind of people. I don't like any of them, and they're in every group. Now, are some groups dominated and some groups they're a minority? Yeah, but you don't get to just say what this is, which is which. You'd have to prove that, and you don't even get to the point where you get to try to prove that, because you say I'm responsible for Anita Sarkeesian, even in things we disagree with. So you just basically deny the existence of individual positions. You don't seem to understand. Feminism is basically whatever is in common or can relate, whatever unifies the ideas of all the individual ideas. Right? So there's all the individual particular ideas, and you look for patterns in there, and you might get a thing called feminism. It doesn't work the other way around. Once you see that pattern, then you don't get to just cookie print onto individuals that that's their position, just like a lot of people that actually are misogynists, that actually openly, yeah, I hate women, they're stupid, they shouldn't be allowed to vote, or I don't hate them, but they shouldn't be allowed to vote. There's a lot of people like that that are on your side of this anti-feminism debate. Do you see me attributing that to you? Am I trying to say you are responsible for what Nigel Farage has said, or anybody, even Sargon? No, it might come up, but I don't tell you that you have those opinions. I'll tell you have to defend Sargon's opinion when you have the same opinion as him. Then it might be like, oh, well, Sargon said this, you agree? Oh, you agree? Well, then you have to defend it. You see how that works in the world where individuals exist? Then you said, you care, of course. You care. Yeah, I care about everything. I don't care if I am not in the mainstream of a group that alleges to have similar goals to mine or policies. I don't care whether I'm really in that mainstream. I also don't believe that you know what the mainstream is. I don't think you've investigated the mainstream. I don't think you've looked at the stream well enough. You've identified parts that you reject, and for some reason you want to say that's why all apples are rotten. And if I say, oh, well, that does look a little bit iffy, this case, you go, aha, see, then why do you defend them? I don't defend them. Well, you're part of the same group. What are you talking about? Were you self-described as a feminist? No, I was asked online on YouTube. I've never gone into a group of even activists and go, I'm this label and that label. And no, we talk about the actual individual issues. I was asked on YouTube years ago, can men be feminists? I said, yeah, men can be feminists. No, really? It's like, well, I consider myself. Why? And I tell you, and you have no clue as to why. It's because if you work on something and it's a labor issue, that made you a labor activist that time. It's not that the label is something that is a Bible for you and there's some manifesto. Maybe you run around with a manifesto, whatever you think there's a manifesto. I don't do that, right? If I happen to go pick apples for a day, then for that day I was a fruit picker. If people say, are you a fruit picker? And I'm like, once. If I do it every other day or once a year, it's something I do. It's not like I suddenly have to defend other fruit pickers. Feminism is the belief that there's gender-based inequities against women that are unjust. And you work on that. If you've ever done that, then you're feminist. No, feminist is a whole dogma with a manifesto, and if someone that calls themselves a feminist writes a scum manifesto, you have to answer for that. No, that's not how any ideology works. None. Not libertarianism, nothing. Even a white supremacist can say, oh no, I don't believe that kind of thing, and we have a lot of them around here that are like, well, I'm not a white supremacist, as a matter of fact, I'm a white nationalist, I just want to live separate, I don't hate them, and they can make that case, it could actually be true. Now, is that the majority of self-described white nationalists? Probably not, but again, we'd have to study that. And it probably wouldn't matter philosophically when it's the ideas themselves that we are comparing. You can't even conceive of the other person's idea. You think you could reject an idea that you can't even describe. You think it's entirely incoherent. And yet you do things like this about, well, you care, of course. I don't care if I'm not in the mainstream of feminism. That's the part I don't care about, right? So I told him he loved word games, blah, 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 the answer that I just gave in video form with more words to it. And I'll say one other thing. Look, I'm telling you my honest opinions. If I take credit for all liberals get credit for the 40-hour work week, fine. You know what? Labor has helped with feminist goals because there's an alliance. Environmentalism, civil rights, feminism, labor. These are alliances. We work together. When they help the peace activists, is another group. I go to an anti-war rally to try to stop this stupid war. I'm called stupid too and out of the mainstream. That might seem creepy and weird. And there's union people there. There's feminist groups, right? But say you don't like protests, whatever, political candidates. There'll be feminists and people from labor. There'll be people from these coalitions that are interested in that particular candidate. Right? So if I give credit to the liberal coalition for liberal accomplishments, it includes the whole thing I'm saying, like labor gets and civil rights movement gets credit for feminist. The feminists helped civil rights movement. They helped the anti-war movement. Everybody gets credit. There's a liberal coalition. And there's a lot of overlap, like me, of people that care about more than one issue. And sometimes, no, they just care about one issue. Labor, for example, has always had a lot of problems with some of the leftist group, and yet there still has been a functional and beneficial alliance. So I'm not lying. You could say I'm wrong. You could say I'm lying to myself, but that's not the kind of lie you're accusing me of. A lie is if I believe this is true, but I say this. And that's not what happened. Right? So if you want to make the issue stuff like that, I don't see how that's going to help your side of the actual argument about feminism. You're saying that you've read my mind, and I don't really believe that the whole liberal coalition should get credit for all the liberal accomplishments. You might not believe that we should all get credit for all of our accomplishments on the left progressive side, the so-called left progressive side, but I do. Therefore, when I say that, it's not a lie just because you disagree, all right? So please learn the difference between we disagree, right, and you think you're so right that I'm wrong, and me lying, okay? Because I obviously don't see things the way you see it, and you seem incapable of fathoming that it's possible to believe a way other than you. So I must be lying. I must agree with you, and I have some other weird, even more inexplicable reason that I'm pretending to disagree with you.